Hot rumor. Warriors are prepping a trade right now. Who's out and who's in? Source, Insider. Have you ever noticed how some news, even without the boom of a superstar arriving, manages to mess with our heads in the same way? Because they don't just affect the cast, they stir expectations. And today, expectations surrounding Golden State are in a very uncomfortable place. At the same time that we want to believe in one last great run, the reality of the roster reminds us with each game that we can't live on memories alone. And that's exactly why this rumor involving Onyeka Okongwu is starting to gain traction. Not because it's the most beautiful headline in the world, not because it's a change that makes the fans get up from their seats and go out celebrating in the street, but because when you look at it calmly, it has that movement look that a front office makes when it's trying to save what can still be saved without blowing up everything along the way. Let's put our cards on the table, the way we talk here at Warriors Family TV. Golden State seems stuck between two versions of itself. The version that still dreams of a team ready to fight for the title, and the version that needs to deal with what's really happening on the court, night after night. The distance between these two versions became large, and when that distance grows, the type of decisions that appear on the table change. Out comes the blockbuster fantasy, and in comes the painful question, what is the possible exchange? This is where Okongwu's name comes in. For many people, it is not a name that has an immediate impact. You don't see it featured in campaigns. You don't see the internet catching fire with the editing of highlights, and it rarely becomes that topic that dominates all conversations for an entire week. But sometimes, the piece that changes the balance of a team isn't the one that shines the brightest. It's the one that solves a specific problem in a way that the team feels firsthand. And Golden State's specific problem today is easy to see. The team needs physical presence, it needs rim protection, it needs a center who can handle real minutes, and it needs, above all, someone who doesn't destroy the spacing. Because if you take away the Warriors' spacing, you're not just changing the style, you are taking the oxygen away from what makes the attack functional. Curry is the gravitational center of all of this. But gravity without space becomes suffocation. And we've seen this movie before. Tight court, predictable rotations, closed passing lines, and the offense looks like a small room with too many people trying to breathe. Now, imagine the following scenario that is circulating as a framework. A three-team trade where Jonathan Kuminga goes to Dallas, Anthony Davis goes to Atlanta, and Okongwu lands in San Francisco. I know. Just hearing Anthony Davis in the middle of this story makes you think, is this really serious? And this is exactly where I want to be very clear with you. This is a rumor, it is market speculation, it is a proposal that may be being discussed or just being floated as a possibility. It is not an official announcement, it is not a confirmed transaction, but the logic behind the rumor says a lot about the moment of each franchise involved, and mainly about how Golden State is being perceived in this market. Notice how the rumor already carries an embedded message. The Warriors would not be buying a star. I would be looking for a functional piece with real impact, but without the cost of total destruction of the future. And that, in itself, is a change in attitude compared to years when Golden State always seemed one step away from pulling off the next historic trick. Okongwu, within this context, becomes an interesting name for a simple reason. He is not just a pivot who sits in the corner waiting for the ball. He has mobility, he has energy, he can play at the right pace, and according to the numbers that many people are pointing out this season, he has been delivering better offensive production than most imagined. And then comes the detail that changes the conversation, the pitch. When you hear he's converting a good three-point percentage with volume, alarm bells go off, because it is not common to find, in the same player, the combination of rim protection and the ability to space. Usually, you have one or the other. When someone appears who threatens to offer both, even if they are not an elite specialist, the fit starts to make sense. And think with me. The Warriors, at certain times, have resorted to solutions that make the situation clear. When a coach like Steve Kerr is forced to test, insist, and adapt rotations looking for shooting, even with obvious limitations in other areas, it's because the dilemma is real. You put someone who can shoot to keep the court open, but they pay the price in physicality, in defense, in rebounding, in presence. And on the other side, if you put someone heavier, more traditional, who doesn't threaten from the perimeter, the attack chokes. It's a tug of war that we notice with each game sequence. The worst thing is that this dilemma appears just when the calendar clock is ticking. The trade deadline is approaching. And here the point is important. When the date approaches, teams stop playing maybe and start deciding. And deciding is difficult. You decide to stay as you are and accept the consequences, or you decide to change and live with the risk. This is why I go back to the beginning. This exchange would be practical, and it would probably be boring for those who want an immediate jolt of energy. But practice at this point can be the difference between having a team that enters a big series with real conditions to survive, or a team that enters praying for everything to go well at the same time. Now, let's talk about what's hurting the fans. Jonathan Kuminga. I want you to forget for a few seconds the idea of potential and think about what Golden State needs today. Kuminga is a high-level athlete with rare tools, but the relationship between fit, minutes, role, trust, and expectations seems to have become a knot. And when it becomes a knot, the market value also suffers, because the whole league sees it. And when the entire league sees it, the conversation changes from promising piece to play that needs a fresh start. If Kuminga really is at a breaking point, whether due to dissatisfaction, lack of space, or divergence of vision, the worst thing for the Warriors is to hold on until this value drops further. No team wants to end up with an asset that will depreciate in value. And it's also not good for the player to be stuck in a situation where they can't take the next step. So when you see a trade in which the Warriors use this asset to address an obvious roster need, there is consistency, even if there is no glamour. And then you ask me, okay, but does this bring the team closer to a title? This is the question that hurts, because it forces us to face the franchise moment with maturity. A center like Okongwu doesn't make Golden State an automatic favorite. He doesn't change the level alone. He doesn't arrive and become the face of the franchise. But he can solve the type of problems that, in the playoffs, kill you silently. The opponent's second chance, offensive rebound, rim protection, lack of physicality, lack of versatility to change and pick and roll, lack of someone who can handle the direct confrontation without compromising the rest. In high-level basketball, these things don't appear as headlines. They appear as 2 more possessions per quarter, as 1 less infiltration, as 1 more contested shot, as an adjustment that prevents the opponent from getting into a rhythm. And when you put that into a series of 7 games, it becomes a difference. Another part that few people consider when looking at this type of movement, contract and age matter a lot. Okongwu is still in a range where you can see evolution and continuity. And if his contract is really friendly, you are not mortgaging the future for a name that will become too expensive or age too quickly within your cap. You are buying utility with room for growth. And this speaks to a delicate point for the Warriors. The team needs to compete now, but it also needs to preserve some flexibility for what comes later, because no one wants to say it out loud, but it's inevitable. The Curry era is coming to an end at some point. And when that moment arrives, the difference between a healthy transition and a long fall often lies in the moves you make beforehand. A manageable contract, a young player, a piece that can continue to help even with core changes, it all counts. But I'm not going to sell you a fairy tale, because here we talk honestly. There is an emotional side to this story that weighs heavily. The feeling that the Warriors have become a team that buys patches. And that hurts, because we saw this franchise dominate the league, change the way it plays, impose an identity, and now suddenly the debate revolves around functional parts and possible exchanges. It's a change of reality. It's as if the franchise had left the main stage and was trying to find the best possible place within a much more competitive scenario with much greater restrictions. And this is where the real reason this exchange is so discussed comes in. It is a mirror. It shows where the Warriors are. It shows how tight the window, the way we knew it was. Curry is still brilliant. It still changes the game. He still creates things that no one else creates. But age comes to everyone, And basketball is unforgiving when you need your star player to make magic every night to survive. And when you look at Draymond, the physical load, the need to fit in, the rotation, the nights when the team needs size and doesn't have it, you understand why a versatile center becomes a priority in the conversation. A pivot that, protecting the rim and not closing the court, is almost a luxury. And when the chance presents itself to achieve this without giving up absurd choices or without completely dismantling what's left of the future, the front office inevitably listens. Now, from the other teams involved in this rumor, you can understand why this appears as a possibility. Dallas, for example, could look to Kuminga as a youth experiment with athletic potential and room to grow. Atlanta, if you are really looking for a star or reorganizing the squad, can enter into this type of structure where one piece becomes redundant, another becomes currency, and you try to find a player who changes the ceiling of the franchise. When several interests align, rumors are born, and sometimes they die the next day, but sometimes they evolve. And here I want to ask you a very direct question. As if we were sitting and watching the game together, do you prefer the movement that solves a real problem, even without exciting it at first? Or do you prefer to wait for something bigger, running the risk of nothing coming and the team continuing with the same limitations until April? Because that's the dilemma. If the Warriors do nothing, the season continues, and the team enters the playoffs, if they do, with holes that are already being explored now in the middle of the regular season. And if you make a desperate move for a big name, you could pay too much for something that doesn't change your destiny and still gets in the way of tomorrow. The practical exchange appears as the halfway point. It doesn't give you the dream, but it gives you ground. And I know it's a subject that divides fans. There are people who hear Okongwu and think, is that it? There are people who listen and think, at least it solves the position. And there are people who look at the whole context and think, maybe this is the kind of step that prepares the next one. All of these reactions are legitimate. What I really don't want is for us to fall into a trap of expectations that only generates frustration. If this trade happens, it needs to be evaluated for what it is. An attempt to fit the team better, protect the rim more, give Kerr more options, alleviate some of the suffocation of the attack, and provide Curry with a slightly more breathable environment. It's not a "we're favorites" declaration. It's a statement of, we still want to be competitive without destroying ourselves. And now I want to hear you. When you look at these types of rumors, do you feel like it's the Warriors being realistic and smart? Or do you feel like it's the Warriors accepting that the era of big moves is over? Would you make this trade if it were on the table in those terms? Would you give up Kuminga for a functional pivot who solves space and defense? Or do you still believe it's worth insisting a little longer, betting on potential, waiting for a different scenario? Write honestly in the comments, because I really want to understand where you are in this. If you think it's the right trade, I want to know why. If you think it's not enough, I want to know what you would look for instead. And if you think the Warriors need to go all or nothing, tell me which all would be worth the risk. The deadline is knocking on the door. And, whether we like it or not, the next decisions could define how we will remember this final phase of the dynasty, as the team that tried to adjust intelligently to compete until the last second, or as the team that waited for a miracle and ended up seeing the window close with no response. And this is where we reach the decisive point, family. It's not just about Okongwu. It's not just about Kuminga. And it's not just about another trade deadline rumor. It's about what Golden State will choose to be from now on. Because each day passes without a clear answer, the clock ticks, the window tightens, and the entire league continues to evolve while the Warriors try to gain time on the knife's edge. If this change happens, it could be the kind of silent move that changes the team from the inside. More rim protection, more consistency, more open court for Curry to breathe, and for the offense to look like a Warriors attack again. But if it doesn't happen, or if the team stands still, the message is also clear. Let's go to the end with what we have, even knowing where it hurts. So, my friend, in the playoffs, there is no anesthesia. There, every weakness becomes a target. Each hole becomes a map, and whoever doesn't adjust falls. So I really want to hear from you. Would you make this switch? Do you think it is the right step to keep the Warriors alive in this fight? Or is it not enough for the size of what the franchise needs? Right here in the comments with your vision, because I read everything, and this debate is what keeps the Warriors family together and strong, even when the season tries to test our patience. And now, if you want to understand this moment in Golden State in depth, without guesswork and without fuss, I'm going to ask you one thing. As soon as you finish this video, go to the pinned comment and click on the Warriors Analysis playlist. Serious. There, I left the analyses that connect all the pieces of this puzzle. Squad, rotations, rumors, the team's real needs, and what could happen before the deadline. Take it from me. After you watch it, you will look at this news with a different eye. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like because this greatly strengthens our work here, and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Because the way things are, one decision can change everything from one moment to the next. The trade deadline is approaching, and the next move could write the last chapter of this dynasty. The question is, will the Warriors react, or will they watch the clock run out?